infusion of positive energy into the lives of single Latter-day Saints everywhere. This is Joy in the Journey Radio.
And welcome back, peeps. Another wonderful, splendiferous, joyous episode of Joy in the Journey Radio. I'm Lance, your host of Joy in the Journey Radio. Today, we're going to go to episode number 330. And it's time for us to reinstate book club. We're visiting book club again. And the book that we're looking at this month, The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. As I said previously, I was a little hesitant about putting in a work of fiction because when I originally conceived the idea of book club, it was just going to be looking at basically nonfiction works that can help Latter-day Saint singles thrive. But reading this book, it's like there's a lot in here that I think we can really have a good discussion about. Unfortunately, I once more, I don't have a co-host or people that want to come on a program to discuss these things. So if you're willing to do this, have these discussions, then hey, hit me up. Go to jointhejourneyradio.com/contact, fill out the contact form, and we'll see about, but for today, it's just a little lonesome me, like there usually is. So hopefully it won't be too distracting. I got some quotes that I prepared to talk about today. So let's go ahead and just dive into this. And I like the a little mini chapter format of the book. So I thought I'd start with one of the ones that comes early on. Now, one of the things you learn in the book very clearly is that truth, with a capital T, is the narrator of the story, which I thought was really interesting. And then when you combine it against the backdrop of, persecution of the Jews during the time of the Nazis and the Holocaust and all that, it just having truth as your narrator puts a really interesting spin on things, and it caused me to reflect on a lot of what I see going on in the world today. But primarily, I wanted to talk about a few of these quotes that really stuck out to me. So here's the first one, and it actually extends onto the next slide. It's from the chapter early on in the book entitled "A Parable." And again, I don't think there's, well, let me just read it, and then we can talk about it. When God was about to create man, he gathered all the top angels to debate the merits of the idea. Should it happen? Yes or no? The angel of mercy said, yes, let man be created, for he will do merciful deeds. The angel of righteousness said, yes, let man be created, for he will do righteous acts. Only the angel of truth disagreed. No, let not man be created, for he will be false and tell lies. So what did the Lord do? He considered all that was said. Then he cast truth out of heaven and threw him to the depths of the earth. Well, as your young people say, that hurts. The story is accurate. How else could I be here talking to you? What was I wrong to warn God that man would be deceitful? Clearly I was not. Humans lie constantly, especially to their maker. Still, the reasons for my heavenly expulsion are highly debated. Some suggest I was buried beneath the ground to rise when mankind was elevated to its best nature. Others say I was being hidden on purpose, as my virtue is beyond your capacity. I have my own theory. I believe I was hurled to earth to smash into billions of pieces, each of which finds its way into a human heart. And there I thrive, or die. You see this little mini chapter at the beginning, towards the beginning of the book. I think that's significant because it sets up basically a construct through which to view everything that's going to come later on. And of course, we being Latter-day Saints, we have revealed viewpoint, if you can call it that, revealed viewpoint into truth and what truth actually is. We have truths that are revealed. So here we're actually talking about the pre-existence, and we know about the Grand Council that was instituted before the world was, and The chain of events that's listed here, I don't know that this is. I don't think this is how it happened. I really don't. I just considering it like, how do I say this? Like with the backdrop of what we know from revealed scripture and from other revelations which modern day prophets and apostles have had and shared with us. It wasn't this like whole council where everyone speaks up and and then the Lord decides to cast truth out of heaven. No, I don't think so. Because we know that God is light, God is truth. So casting truth out of heaven means casting himself out of heaven, which is totally, utterly ridiculous. But, be that as it is, the story is constructed here helps to establish truth as the narrator for this story. As it says, the story Zachary Hell's got to be here talking to you. It's like the fact that I'm here talking to you is proof that the story that I'm telling you is true. So it's setting it up for what's going to come later. And then this part here where he talks about he has his own theory of why he was expelled. So it could smash into billions of pieces, each of which finds its way into a human heart, and there I thrive or die. So here he's setting up this platform for relative truth. That, your truth and my truth may not be the same thing, but they're little shards from this huge glass object that was, broken into a billion pieces. And so, your truth may be different than my truth, but, ultimately there's no one truth because it got smashed into a billion pieces. Yeah, I got some problems with that. I think there are different perspectives. You can have different perspectives on the same truth, but truth itself is objective. Truth itself doesn't matter who's telling it. Truth itself lasts for eternity. It's eternal, unchanging, evermore, and that's just the truth. Which is one of the reasons why God is synonymous with truth, because God himself has all those same qualities, eternal, everlasting, and it doesn't really matter how you're perceiving him. It's the same being. So, yeah, this idea of just setting yourself up for relative truth is just like, yeah, I got to take issue with that. But anywho, I wanted to put this quote in because, again, it provides a construct for what's going to come after. And not long after, we get this little mini chapter called How a Lie Grows. And as we're starting to get more into the story of the book. So essentially, you've got this family of Jews, and the main character is the boy in the family named Nico. And he has a brother, Sebastian, and they live in this Greek village of Salonika, and the stories about Nazi Germany during World War II. They come and basically invade Greece, and they take over Salonika, and then the problem starts, and you see people getting shipped off to Auschwitz, famous concentration death camp, but this boy Nico, he has this reputation for always telling the truth, absolutely, purely telling the truth, which of course is really interesting because the narrator of the story of the little boy who always tells the truth is truth. And how there's a chain of events that unfolded to where this boy Nico tells his first lie. And so we're starting to get to that point where the little boy tells his first lie, hence the title of the book, The Little Liar. So again, this quote goes off into the next slide. So let's just go and just read through this, and then we'll talk about it. Sometimes I watch people eat. I find it interesting. Food is the substance that keeps you alive, so I would think you would choose the kind that does you the most good. Instead, you choose what pleases the palate. I see you at buffet restaurants, slapping on some of this, some of that, ignoring the rest, even if you know it is more helpful. I notice this because it is what you do with me. You choose a sliver of truth here, a sliver there. You disregard the parts that displease you, and soon your plate is full. But just as ignoring proper food will ultimately decay your body, so will handpicking the truth eventually rot your soul. Take a boy born in 1889 to a large Austrian family. Now, okay, let's just stop here. So, despite my disagreement with what he was saying before, I agree with this, like 100%. It's like you can't just pick and choose, what truths are going to be operating in your life. Truth is going to be operational regardless of, whether or not you choose to believe it or not. What's true is, you could say, I don't believe in gravity. Gravity's still going to have a pull on you as long as you're on this planet. And that's just the laws of physics. It's the laws of nature. And so you may not believe in it, but it's still an operation. So I agree with this too. It's like you can't just pick and choose which truths you're going to believe in, like a smorgasbord, because they're going to operate whether or not you choose to believe them. So it's much better to believe in what's actually true, and get on that bandwagon of living life more aligned with the way things are actually operating, because it's hard to have joy when you're kicking against the pricks, when you're cutting against the grain, when you're trying to swim upstream. It's a lot easier to have joy in your journey when you operate in accordance with the way things naturally operate. So let's pick this back up. Take a boy born in 1889 to a large Austrian family. His father beats him constantly. His teachers berate him. His mother, the only person who seems to care for him, dies when he is 18. He becomes sullen, withdrawn. He drifts, thinking himself a painter, but finds no acceptance in the art world. Over time, he evolves into a loner. He refers to himself as Wolf. He develops a penchant for blame. It's their fault, not mine. A pattern of self-deception begins. Now, we already set this up. Okay, by the time you get to this point of the book, you already know that you're talking to a Jewish family, and it's like, what, 1939, 1940 or something like that. So you kind of know, okay, if you don't know who this is, who's being described here, all I can say for you is you need to read more history, because it's pretty clear who we're talking about here. So if you don't really know, I'm not going to give it to you right now because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, if it doesn't come clear with what keeps going on, then I'm sorry, you're just lost. No amount of education is going to do you any good. When war calls, the wolf volunteers. He likes the clarity of combat and its chosen truths. We got that relative truth idea again. For all truths in war are chosen. The only real truth of war is that no one should engage in it. The conflict ends badly. As his country surrenders, the wolf lays wounded in the hospital, burning with mustard gas and humiliation. He cannot accept this defeat. To him it means weakness, something he despises, mostly because he has so much weakness inside him. When his country's leaders agree to a peace treaty, he vows to overthrow them one day. That day arrives soon enough. He joins a political party. He storms to the top of it. Well, I had a problem with their history here. I don't know. He's like vowed to overthrow the leaders. I don't know that he ever did that. He did join a political party, but that's because he was looking for work after the war and no one would hire him. And then he got this offer from the army to serve as a spy inside a political movement. And so he's attending meetings of this political movement as a spy for the government. And the more he's associating with the people in this movement, the more he comes to be a true believer himself. And then this is when he begins his rise through the ranks of the political party. So he fires a gun into the ceiling, declares the revolution has begun. He climbs to power on the back of lies. He starts by blaming his nation's woes on its Jews. And the more he points at them, the higher he rises. They are the problem. They are the reason for our humiliation. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but it's not like, I don't think he set out by looking at the Jews as like the whole total problem. That's not my understanding of what happened. My understanding is that the Jews were a part of it, but he was all about purity, and he he thought that the nation had become weak through the inclusion of all these impurities, and so the Jews were just one impurity. Okay, he was almost against, people that practiced homosexuality were just as impure. People who did not have like solid German ancestry, they were also impurities that you needed to remove. And the list just goes on. So it's not like the way it's written here, it makes it sound like the Jews were the only problem or the crux of the problem. And they weren't. They were just one piece of what was considered the problem. Of course, the real problem was thinking that all of these impurities were actually impurities. That was the real problem, and not recognizing the strengths that these different people could bring into the nation as a whole. So anyway, blaming the Jews, he accuses Jews of wielding secret powers, hidden influence, creating a lie so big that no one would question it, an accusation stunningly true of himself. Jews are a disease, he declares, that must be eradicated to restore German health. Such falsehoods bring the wolf power, great power, and crowds of people cheer his speeches. He elevates the chancellor, then president, then supreme leader. He executes his enemies. He feels his inferiority fading with each new rub of success. He stacks his plate high with lies sizzled in hate, then feeds them to his armies. The armies grow. They follow him over the border, hoping to squash their neighbors under the seductive banner of Deutschland über alles, Germany over all. Why do they do the wolf's bidding? Deep down, all humans know that being cruel to others, torturing them, killing them, is neither good nor righteous. How can they permit it? Because they tell themselves a story. They create an alternate version of who I am and swing it like an axe. Why do you think I argued with those other angels? Righteousness, mercy? I tried to warn them. Those who abuse me will run roughshod over all the other virtues and convince themselves they are high-minded in the process. This is a part of what was going on. It's like psychologically, people had just lost their way. And this is one of the reasons why I think, revelation has to be the key. I'm reminded of, President Nelson's oft-quoted declaration from, I think it was 2018 or 2019. I had to go look it up. But anyway, it's where he said that if you're not in tune with the spirit, not able to get your own revelation, you're not going to be able to survive spiritually in the days to come. And we can see in this, walk through history that, that principle is right there. It's the revelation that holds you steadfast. If when you, build your house on revealed truth, then it's a lot harder for you to follow after things like this that go on. The wolf's deceptions grow more powerful. He creates words to blanket this evil. This is an old trick. If you want to get away with lying, first change the language. And this, I think that's key right there. That we need to stop and take note of that. Language is so important. I keep railing against, inside letters and culture, dropping F-bombs. And of course, now keep in mind, I'm going to drop one here just so you know what I'm going to say. And just be clear. I mean, I hate using profane language on this program, but, I have to, just come out and say it. When we talk about family wards, we're dropping F-bombs that have an effect on people in the way that they think. Because traditionally there's been this culture within the church that says, okay, so this ward is for families because it's a family ward. So you single people who don't have a family, you go over there to that singles ward. And then when you get married, you'll have your family and then you can come join us here in the main group. I think that culture is changing, but I think part of what's holding us back is the language that we're using, because language is a representation of the way that we think. So if we keep using this term family ward, then that reinforces this idea that the congregations of the church, which should be for the general membership of the church, that these are places for people with families. And we need to, change our mindset, which involves changing our language, because language is a reflection of the way we think. So if we're going to think of our wards as being a place where everyone can congregate, regardless of their marital status, then I think we need to change the language and we need to be serious about it. So we need to stop saying family ward and we need to start saying something else. Now, when I lived in Seattle, one of the local leaders there was recommending the use of the term general membership ward. I think that's a mouthful. You could shorten it to general ward, but the latest edition of the handbook, there's the term geographic ward, which I actually think is better, because that's really what constitutes, who belongs in the congregation. It's members of the church that live within a certain geographic area, right? So I'm recommending that we replace the use of the term family ward with geographic ward. And we start talking about geographic wards and not family wards. Now, we can just talk about singles wards. Personally, I think they should be done away with. I think we shouldn't have singles wards. I don't think we should be separating people out by marital status, because just by creating another ward for single people, it's essentially saying you're an other. You're not part of the main group, because we're making this other group that it's an other. It's separating it. It's marginalizing you from the main thing, the main show, which is in the geographic ward. I think we should just keep with geographic wards, but obviously I'm not in charge of anything. I can tell you from a visit that President Oaks made to a stake that I used to live in back in 2009, 2008, something like that. So somewhere around in there, that he was talking with the stake leadership about how they were having discussions. Now remember, 2008, so this isn't anything recent. I'm sure the discussions are continuing, but they were talking about doing away with singles wards. They were having that conversation in the upper echelons of the church leadership. So this isn't just me spouting off. Okay. There are people that, of course, they haven't done anything. And I think that's because they're not unanimous. I mean, the church never acts without unanimity amongst the brethren. So obviously there's some disagreement there and that they haven't worked through. And that's why the status quo is continued. But yeah, I'm on board with the idea that we should get away with singles wards. Quit creating this space for people to be others, and let's just bring everybody into one group. Because as we read in the New Testament, one faith, one baptism, one Lord. We should be one, and that should be really set out in the way that we congregate. Because it's not about you congregating together as singles. So essentially, the whole purpose of it was so that people can have an easier time finding a companion, and then they can get that marker of belonging within the traditional culture that, if you really want to belong, you got to be married. that's really what it was about initially. And now I think if we're going to change the culture into something to where we're all one, I really think we need to just do away with all of that. Let's just come together and be one, and make the marker of belonging within the group. Are you desirous to make and keep sacred covenants? And have, instead of being centered on, um, marital status, have it be centered on Christ and, our willingness to be disciples of Him. And I think that's better achieved if we just do away with all these specialty wards and just come together and to one place. But again, some people are not going to believe that. Anyway, back to the story. So he uses this phrase. We were talking about language. He uses this phrase, the law to relieve the distress of the people, to give himself legal authority. He uses the phrase living space to justify taking land. He uses phrases like dispatched and removed as kinder words for murder. And he uses the phrase final solution as a euphemism for his ultimate plan to wipe Jews off the face of the continent. He finds loyal followers among the resentful, the alienated, the angry, and the ambitious, and adults who happily turn on their neighbors, and in youths who enjoy pushing others to the ground with impunity. He finds them in bitter, lost souls like Udo Graf, whose mother left his father for a Jewish man, and whose father subsequently took his own life with a blade in a bathtub. Now, this Udo Graf is a character in the story here, and he's like the main point of interaction between Nico and Nico's family and the Nazis and the Germans in World War II. This Udo Graf character. Udo, who studies science at a German university, becomes a loner like the wolf, a miscreant with no friends. When he's 24, he hears the wolf speak in a public square. He hears him talk about a new Reich, an empire of German domination that will last 1,000 years. He feels as if he's been given a personal invitation. Follow this man and solve the pain of his own miserable experience. So Udo joins the wolf's forces. He marries the cause. He rises in the ranks, and in time reaches the position of Hauptsturmführer. Sorry, I'm not up on my German. A mid-level commander in the Nazi SS. Then in the summer of 1942, the wolf promotes Udo and sends him to Salonika. Again, that's the town where this whole thing starts. To execute a horrifying plan to rid the city of every Jewish citizen, which brings us to Liberty Square that hot July morning. This is how Udo first encountered Nico Crispus and winks at him as if all will be well. It will not be, of course. The end of a lie is always darkness. We are far from the end of his story. I want us to think about that portion near the end. The end of a lie is always darkness. On the surface, I think a lot of us would agree with that. But I want to step back and think for a moment. Is it really? Is the end of a lie really always darkness? We think so. Or what is it that constitutes a lie? Is any act of potential deception a lie? Remember the story early on in the Book of Mormon where Nephi is getting the plates, and how does he do it? This first two attempts failed. The third attempt, which was successful, was different, and that involved deception. So you've got the first, the first two ideas. It's like, well, hey, let's just go ask him for it. So you're just being upfront with him. You're just asking him for it, right? There's no deception there. That didn't work. They said, okay, well, let's try to buy it. So they went back to their house. They got inside. They collected a bunch of valuable items. And they gathered this, and they said, hey, why don't we just do an exchange? You give us the plates, and we'll give you all this. And Laban, there's no deception there. And the response they got from Laban was, okay, I'm going to chase you out of my house, point of a sword, and I'm just going to take your stuff. So that exactly works. So the third approach which did involve deception. That's the one that worked. I mean, you find Laban drunk, passed out. So what do? You cut off his head. You put on his clothes and you pretend to be him. The end of a lie is always darkness. I mean, we see that, because of these acts, the plates were able to be secured, and we know the benefit that had for the posterity of Lehi and his son Nephi, throughout the years of the Nephite civilization. We see the benefit that it had. So, is the end of a lie always darkness? I have to ask this question, and I don't know. I mean, because when I originally read the sentence for the first time, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then as I started thinking about it more, it's like, well, no, we actually have examples where people weren't exactly being completely honest, and yet, there was a lot of good things that came out of that. And, if the end of a lie is always darkness, how is it that good things are coming out of darkness? See, intellectually, that doesn't make any sense to me. So then I have to question this idea: is the end of a lie always darkness? Anyway, if you want to think about that, put your own comments down below. I mean, that's fine. I'd rather have people here on the program so we can actually talk about and discuss it. But yeah, just that's what book club is. We're just sharing ideas that make us think, right? Because it's in the thinking that helps us to become, better people and help us to thrive during our single years. I want to move on. Look at the time. We got to move on. So I want to move on to this next quote from mini chapter called Acceptance. Of all the lies you tell yourself, perhaps the most common is that if you only do this or that, you will be accepted. It affects your behavior with classmates, neighbors, colleagues, lovers. Humans do a great deal to be liked. They are needier than I can comprehend. I will tell you this much: it is often futile. The truth is, there I go, referencing myself, people ultimately see through efforts to impress them. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but they do. That's really interesting observation there. I think I can hitch my bandwagon to this because, I've actually seen this in my life. And, I'm sure we've all seen stories, and maybe some of us have experienced it ourselves, where we were actually doing something so that some other person would like us. This is something I've seen, especially within dating circles. People trying to put forward an impression or perception of who they are, even if it has no bearing on who they really are. Because what they really want, they just think, well, if I can just get in, then I can, I can have what I want. When really, if what you want is to advance to the next stage of your dating journey, that's no way to do it. Because again, if you go back to fundamentals, to advance to any stage on the dating journey, you need an agreement. Well, if you obtain that agreement through false representation, what do you think the reaction is going to be when the truth comes out? The other person's not going to appreciate, making an agreement that otherwise would not have been made. And it's just going to backfire totally. So it's never a good idea. So back to the story here. The person trying to impress Udo Graf was a Jewish dock worker named Yaki Pinto, an individual who, for most of his life, had longed for acceptance. Mustached, reed thin, never married, 53 years old, Pinto lived in the eastern end of the city and walked an hour to the docks every morning. He had few friends and little education. He spoke with a stutter. Before the war, he mostly kept to the boat he worked on and the filtered cigarettes he smoked. But Pinto's grandmother was born in Hamburg. She had lived with his family when Pinto was growing up, and he learned the German language from her. When the Nazis entered Salonika, they created something called the Judenrat. The word itself translates to Jewish council, but I've spoken about the power of twisting language. There was no council being sought, just a sham to pretend that Jews had some control over their fate. Those who joined the Judenrat were charged by the Germans with implementing their orders, as were the Jewish police, established under their control. And while some in these positions tried to stave off the harshest Nazi indignities, most were viewed by fellow Jews as collaborators not to be trusted. Pinto had volunteered for the Judenrat almost immediately, and Udo Graf had determined his German skills could be useful. He could translate the gibberish these Greek Jews were speaking. Your task is simple, Udo had told him. You translate what I say, and you tell me exactly what they're saying. No lies, no deviations. So even though he's lying to the people, he doesn't want to be lied to himself. Pinto agreed. He actually smiled when he received his official papers with the Nazi stamp on the bottom. He believed working beside the enemy would protect him from their wrath. Silly thought. Would a lamb be protected from a wolf simply by walking alongside it? I think that's an excellent point, and something that I think, we should be mindful of. If you really believe something, then don't go acting against something that you don't. I think a lot of these people just, I don't know what they were thinking, and I certainly don't pretend to understand it because I haven't been through anything like what they've been through. But based on what I've been through, if I were to take that background instead of experiences and then have this put on me, I'd be living town. I mean, earlier in the book, you had, Nico's father built a business selling tobacco and different things associated with smoking. So he's got cigars and pipes and all the rest. And one day the Germans just basically give his shop to somebody else, and he's thrown out of his shop, his business that he built himself with his own sweat and toil. And that's one of the first steps that the Germans were taking to sort of corral the Jews together. I mean, to me, that was the red flag. I mean, at that point, this is like, dude, if they can do this to you and they're getting away with it, which they did, then that's a sign they're not going to stop. Why would they stop at that? That's just a sign. It's like, you don't want to be here. You want to just get out. And so, knowing what I know with my background, having served a mission in Guatemala at the end of their 30-year civil war, in which people who disagreed with the government were just disappearing. And I saw the effect that had on the populace. I'm telling you right now, peeps, I mean, if, Nico's father, what happened to him happened to me. It's like, I'd be looking to leave town. Because it's just clear. It's like, this is what's going to happen. If you stick around, it's just going to get worse. And of course, they stuck around. And of course, it did get worse as you go, into the story. But, this idea, would a lamb be protected from a wolf simply by walking alongside it? There's a lot of people that actually think this way, right? Because we're not open to change. We're open to maintain the status quo as much as possible. And so, in a way, I don't blame a lot of these people for not leaving when they should have left. But at the same time, I think this is a lesson for us. I think, we need to be approaching the things that happen in our lives and be open to change, open to doing things differently, opening to just saying, you know what, forget the status quo. We're going to do what's effective in the moment. And I think that line of thinking makes us more open for the joy that we can receive in our journey, despite the difficulties that may come in our lives. But, we're not hardwired to think that way. So it takes practice. It takes persistence. It takes intention and dedication. But I think it's a key point that if you want to thrive, especially in your single years, then you really want to pay attention to this idea that, you don't want to just go along to get along. Sometimes it's better just to say, look, this is who I am. And if I'm not going to fit in here, then I'll just find somewhere else where I do fit in. Okay, so now here we go. Another chapter further along in the book. So At this point in the story, Nico, the little boy who had this reputation for always telling the absolute truth, was had actually compromised. He actually did lie. So now he's, of course, one lie. Once you tell one lie, it's easier to tell another lie and then another lie. And so, yeah, so now we're at a point where he's actually lied quite a bit. And in fact, some of his lies have actually kept him alive. So again, all lies end up in darkness. I mean, the guy stayed alive. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a right or a wrong answer here, but I have to pose the question. I think it would make an interesting discussion if I actually had someone here on the program to discuss it with. Anywho, next quote we get from a chapter entitled Nico from Lie to Lie. Now, I must tell you about Nico's journey. For me, this is painful, like a mother speaking about her son's time in prison. The boy who never lied shed his honest skin on those Salonika railroad tracks in 1943. By the time he appeared on the banks of the Danube, now nearly 14 years old, he was barely recognizable to me or to those like Fanny who knew him in his earthly form. So Fanny is a girl who was known by the family. Nico likes her. Sebastian, his brother, likes her. So, of course, there's this little jealousy rivalry between the two boys. And Sebastian, dislikes his brother because Fanny actually liked him better. But yeah, it's those kind of drama details that make interesting stories. Adolescence is not so much a right for Nico as pounce upon him. He sprouted 6 inches in height. His lovely features grew sharper. His voice deepened to a soft baritone. He put on 22 pounds. This does not count the weight of his deceptions, which is beyond calculation. But those deceptions kept him alive. Nico became, as Udo had labeled him, a good little liar, undoing a lifetime of honesty almost overnight. This is not without precedent. Did Adam not lose paradise with a single bite of an apple? Was Lucifer not a good angel before his eternal expulsion? We are all one fateful act from a redirected destiny, and the price we pay can be immeasurable. The quote goes on, but I want to stop here and consider this idea for a moment. Adam lost paradise with a single bite of an apple. Well, first of all, we don't know that it was an apple. That's just part of the mythology that's developed over the centuries. But, we who recognize revealed truth understand that, yeah, he did lose paradise, but, once he understood the position he was in, where Eve had been deceived, and, now she was going to get expelled from the garden. Adam, who wanted to stay with the woman, and, why wouldn't you want to stay with the woman? So, he's got to follow suit and go along with that. And he recognizes that, humanity's not going to come into being unless he follows what Eve did. They leave the garden. So, yeah, I mean, traditionally it's believed that, this, expulsion was, based on sin and based on, acceptance of evil, when really it was more of a transgression, as Joseph Fielding Smith put it, more of a transgression. So, yeah, we could talk more about that, but I'm looking at the time. We got to move on. So, Lucifer, a good angel before his external expulsion. Yeah, I mean, we know it's that we read in Isaiah, "Oh, how thou art fallen from heaven, Lucifer, son of the morning." And we know from Revelation that, yeah, Lucifer was actually one of the, top children, I guess for lack for words here, top children of our Heavenly Father, and he's just turned and went the other way. We are all one fateful act from a redirected destiny. I don't know if everything hinges on one act, but certainly one act can be highly influential. I can agree with that idea. Nico paid such a price, he lost me, meaning he lost truth, because remember, truth is the narrator. He could no longer speak truth. He shunned it like the devil's breath. Saying true things only reminded him that his honesty may have condemned his family to death. Who among us could stare at such a blazing sun of accountability and not go blind? So lying became Nico's new language. He used countless falsehoods to move from place to place. He was helped in these endeavors by certain people he met along the way. Okay, and then of course, the story goes on from there. But I'm putting this quote into the mix because it reminded me of the quote that I shared earlier about how all lies end in darkness, and the lies he's telling really ending in darkness? I mean, he was able. First of all, yeah, he lied, and so his family, because of the lies that he told, his family got put on a train to Auschwitz. But his lies kept him alive, and it enabled him later on in the story to keep Fanny alive. And of course, we see later in the story, things going on between him and his brother. I'm not going to give anything away, but this idea that all of these lies necessarily end up in darkness, is that really true? Yeah, again, I don't know. I just don't know. So, um, yeah, I'll put that to you. Leave a comment below. Think about it, and put yourself in the comment. Let's see what discussion we can generate with this. I think that's an interesting question. So I think this is the last quote. It goes on for the next, or maybe this is the next to last. Anyway, later on in the story, it's after the war. People are looking for the Nazis because they went into hiding, because a lot of them went into hiding. And so, there are people hunting down Nazis, trying to bring them to justice. And Sebastian, who married Fanny, right? He actually ends up, he gets the girl. And his brother's nowhere to be found, at least not at this point in the story. And, he gets this letter from this Nazi hunter saying, hey, I think you might have information that'll be helpful. Please come to Vienna and, help me obtain information that you have that may lead to the capture of one or more of these Nazis, and we can bring them to justice. So, of course, Sebastian, having lived through the horror of Auschwitz, is very much interested in helping out. But yeah, his wife, Fanny, I mean, what she had to go through escaping the Nazis, to be captured, escaped, and then captured again. And what she went through when she was in their custody, she's terrorized by the thought of having anything more to do with it. It would have anything more to do with it. So of course, what he says here makes sense. He hid the letter from the Nazi hunter, right? He did not tell Fanny of his correspondence. Why? Because he knows what his reaction is going to be. So this gets into something that I think we as singles need to talk about. How honest is honest? I mean, do you really want to say everything? Is it okay to hide back a little bit? It's like, well, everything I said was true, but I'm not going to share everything. Certainly, the context here is within a marriage relationship, but we as singles encounter similar contexts within dating relationships. And certainly we use the choices that people make in those contexts to decide whether or not we want to go forward in a marriage situation with said person. So, I think the scene that's going to be laid out here has direct application for us as Latter-day Saint singles. He hid the letter from the Nazi hunter. In this way, he deceived his wife. It is nothing new. The lies spouses tell one another are most often omissions. You skip this detail. You don't share that fantasy. You live out certain stories altogether. You justify these acts by deeming me, the truth, too agitating. Why stir things up? Why make waves? Sebastian, for example, had never mentioned to Fanny his previous marriage to the girl named Rivka. That poor girl had died from typhus in Auschwitz, and Sebastian had barely spoken to her. In his mind, the entire relationship, the hurried wedding, the mumbled vows, his grandmother's ring was a mistake of someone else's doing, and he didn't want to be reminded of it. He also didn't want to upset Fanny. So he deceived her out of kindness, or at least that's what he told himself. Fanny, in her own way, did the same thing. Knowing Sebastian's envy of his brother, not once in their marriage had she mentioned that she had seen Nico again on the banks of the Danube River, or that she believed he had saved her life. When Sebastian finally showed his wife the letter, she was taken aback. Why would you contact this man? She asked. What he's doing is important. So let him do it. We have a life here in Greece. But you read what he said. My information can help. Help what? Help him find those bastards. And do what? Hang them. Hang them until they rot. Fanny turned away. More killing, she mumbled. It's not killing, it's justice. No, if that's not a lie, I don't know what is. It's not killing, it's justice. Justice for my parents, my grandparents, my sisters. Justice for your father, Fanny. Don't you want that? How many of us, Larry St. Singles, have been through something traumatic? And we're looking at our single status today as the result of choices that someone else made that put us through this traumatic experience, and it didn't have to be. And so we start using language to label things as something that they're not. We're actually mislabeling it. It's not killing, it's justice. It's not revenge, it's justice. It's retribution. We have to make things right. How many of us get into that situation and lie to ourselves? Fanny wiped a tear away. Do I get him back? What? If you find these Nazis, do I get my father back? Sebastian scowled. That's not the point. It is to me, she whispered. I want to go to Vienna. Fanny blinked hard. And leave Tia and me? Of course not. I would never leave you. He reached for her hand. See, now he's trying to convince her. I want us all to go. We can move there. I can work for this man. I know it. Fanny shook her head, slowly at first, then faster, violently, as if seeing something terrible coming for her. Austria? No, Sebastian, no. I ran away from Austria once. No, please, no. It's different these days. It's not. It's where they all live. It's where they all came from. Fanny, I need to do this. Why? She was sobbing now. Why can't you leave this behind? Because I can't, he screamed. Because I see it every night. Because people have to pay for what they did. People have to pay for what they did. But who says you have to be the one to make them pay? Who says you have to be the one to dispense justice? This is why we read in the scriptures, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and I will repay. Because he's the only one who can judge completely righteously. And so our job is not to dispense justice. Our job is to forgive and move on. That's our job. Fanny squeezed her eyes shut. She heard her daughter crying from the other room. Her shoulders slumped. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. Is this about your brother? What? Is this about Nico? You want revenge? Stop talking foolish. I want to help this man find Nazis and give them what they deserve. That's all. And I'm going to do it. He glared at her, his jaw set tight. But he had to look away because, and I should know, she was right. Yes, a big part of him wanted Udo Graf captured, convicted, and executed 1,000 times over. But part of him also wanted this man in Vienna to track down someone else, a certain young Nazi helper by the name of Nico Crispus, and bring him to justice. So this sets up, interesting dichotomy for this plays into the rest of the story, towards the end of the book. And of course, I'm not going to give out any spoilers because I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. You should read it. It's actually overall, it's a really good book. But I think this last quote brings into mind this question that I was asking just a moment ago. It's like, how often that we as Latter-day Saint singles lie to ourselves by saying that what we're doing is righteous when in fact it's not really righteous at all. We feel justified. It makes us feel good. It's catharsis for the trauma that we endured. And so it feels right. But in the end, is it really right? Is it really our job to dispense justice? Or is our job really more focusing on the contribution we can make to making other people's lives better? The contribution that we can make to those who come after us by looking at our challenges and saying, yeah, you know what? I got a raw deal, but I'm going to make the best of it. And I'm still going to have joy in my journey. And no one's going to stop me from having that joy. I think we need to some of us need to take a step back and just say, you know what? I'm not trying to minimize the extent of the trauma that some of us have been through. I've had some pretty traumatic experiences as a single adult. And I've heard of, other stories from other singles that are also really, really traumatic. And just the things that we have to endure, they are what they are. That is truth. And here's another piece of truth, that you get to choose what you make of it. You get to choose your response. So what response are you going to make? Are you going to, surrender to revenge and become bitter and vindictive and resentful? Or are you just going to say, you know what? I don't need that baggage. I got enough problems. I'm going to let that go. And I'm just going to let the Lord take care of that. And I'm just going to move forward. And I think the joy that we're all looking for in our journey comes by letting go and moving on. So, I think we need to quit lying to ourselves. That's just one way. It's one way singles lie to themselves. There are a host of other ways. If you know of other ways singles lie to themselves, let's start discussion down below. Leave a comment. Let's get some discussion going. But yeah, that's pretty much what I got for the program today. So thanks again for watching, peeps. Hopefully I was able to offer you something that was interesting. The book for next month, I haven't completely decided yet. I'm kind of leaning toward one particular tome, but I haven't really set myself out about it, so I don't have it to show you like what we're going to talk about. Watch the website. I will announce it, and here soon, so we can we all start reading it. And then next month we'll reconvene with book club and have another wonderful discussion around a book and talk about ideas that can help us thrive in our single years. I think if we're going to thrive, as I already say, singles, what we're learning out of this book, is that, generally speaking, honesty is the best policy. But again, I got that lingering question out there. So it's like, so what happens during the times when, deception is actually a part of the plan? I don't know. I don't have this. I don't have my mind clear on that yet. So if any of you peeps out there can help, feel free to chip in and come back next week for the wonderful, exciting, splendiferous, joyous episode of Joy in the Journey Radio. So until next time, this is your host reminding you there is joy to be had all along your journey. So take that joy, journey on.